I'd like to ask the royalty, the members of the committee, the militia, to all come up on the church steps here, please, so we can commence with our opening ceremony. This is perfect. This is perfect. Thank you, Patty Nager and Les Petits Chanteurs. We will hear more from them later in the program. But right now, I would like to call your attention to the fact that the Milice de Saint-Geneviève, our own militia, the old Queen's militia, is here to keep us safe and well protected through the proceedings of the day. Thank you, Colonel. My name is Bill Nager. I am your MC for this morning, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2017 French Heritage Festival. This year we are celebrating the 20th year of the French Heritage Festival. So if you've been involved in the past, give yourself a round of applause for all the hard work that's brought us up to this day. French Heritage Committee people of years past. Of all the wonderful festivals we have here in St. Genevieve, the French Heritage Festival is our chance to pay tribute to the French traditions of singing, dancing, good food, and good times. So, as a bit of a historical background to this event, it's important to note that this festival was started 20 years ago by Les Amis, the Friends, a St. Louis-based organization, and also members of our local Foundation for the Restoration of St. Genevieve. And we thank them for their continued vision and dedication to the community. As the concept of a traveling 3-day festival over Memorial Day weekend at the beginnings of the festival, Saturday was in St. Louis, Sunday was in St. Genevieve, and Monday, Memorial Day, was in Cape Girardeau. As the idea of a 3-day moving festival was abandoned and the date moved to this weekend in June, the reins locally were picked up by the Foundation for the Restoration and our downtown French Colonial St. Genevieve Downtown Merchants Association, and the festival chair, our own dear and now deceased Donna Card Charity. Today's festival is organized and coordinated by the St. Genevieve Downtown Renewal Project. Dating back more than 300 years, to the early French explorers, traders, and voyageurs who explored and colonized the middle Mississippi Valley, to a time when the first settlers founded St. Genevieve in the early 1700s, We owe our thanks to all those who have come before us. Today we are very fortunate to have so many outstanding and authentically preserved examples of our French colonial historic homes, and we hope you will find time to explore these treasures as you celebrate with us today. At this time, and in the absence of our local pastor, we have asked Jack Ketty if he wouldn't come and ask blessings on this event. Jack?
Heavenly Father, we ask you today for your blessing on our town and its people as St. Genevieve celebrates our rich French heritage. It is fitting that we begin the day's celebration here at the doorway to your church. We recall that most of our French ancestors and early settlers brought their devotion to you and your church, whether they came here from France, French Canada, or by way of the Caribbean. We thank you for blessing us with good weather for our festivities and the ever-vigilant protection provided by our patron saint, St. Genevieve. We humbly ask to grant safe travels for the visitors who have come here to celebrate with us. And we dedicate this day to you. And we ask these things in the name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Typically, these proceedings would be overseen by our current king and queen, who took the throne at this year's King's Ball in February. This year's king and queen are off to some kind of a royal jaunt up in the area territory of Chicago. So we're glad to have with us last year's queen, the 2016 queen, Mary Lee Wisnowski, and she is here with a couple of her friends, grandsons of from Georgia.
It's been my pleasure. This is my favorite town.
Thank you, Mary Lee. At this time, I'd like to recognize the members of the Festival Planning Committee and to thank the St. Genevieve Downtown Renewal Project as sponsors of the event, as well as the St. Genevieve County Community Foundation and the Municipal Band Grant Program for providing additional funding support for the French Heritage Festival. Would all those associated with the festival, the Planning Committee, and the Downtown Renewal Project please raise your hand so you can be recognized? Thank you all so much for putting this together for us. I'd like to once again call on the Les Petits Chanteurs to come forward under the guidance of Patty Nager. And I believe they are going to do for us Un Canadien Errant. Is that correct?
And Canadien Errant. Tell them how much I wish that I could be once more in my beloved land, that I will see no more. And should trees stay on sea, I'll see aboard it flow. And should trees stay on sea, I'll see aboard it flow. Oh, my own beloved land, I'll not forget till death, and I will speak of her with my last dying breath. My own beloved land, I'll not forget till death, and I will speak of her with my last dying breath.
Thank you once again, Les Petits Chanteurs. At this time, I would like to ask our mayor, Mayor Paul Hassler, to come forward and say a few words. Greeting.
Well, good morning, everyone. What a beautiful day the Lord has made. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. So, first of all, on behalf of the city, I'd like to welcome all of our guests and visitors and family and friends. And as today you just enjoy just a glorious day and celebrate the rich history of our little town, St. Genevieve. And when you do that, when you go home, tell your friends, tell your family, and send them back our way, because we have a lot to celebrate here, a lot of wonderful history. And most of all, what I love most about this town is the friendliness and just the amount of volunteers that make things happen in this little city. I've taken it for granted my whole life living here. Well, my whole life, but a part of my life. And things like this, it takes volunteers to make things happen. In this city, it's one thing about it. Whenever something happens, there's always people to step up to the plate. And that's what I love about it. I love the heart of the people that live in this city and the surrounding counties. So as you enjoy your day, just be friendly. If you got questions, just ask. Somebody will tell you. Somebody will direct you. And just enjoy your day today. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Before we ask the chanteurs to come and lead us in their closing song, I'd like to mention that there will be the Grand Promenade following the opening ceremonies. I'll tell you a bit more about that shortly. So with that, the chanteurs will come up and lead us in La Marseillaise. Then I'll be calling on the committee chair, Kathy Grusling, to come up and say a few words, and we'll have our Grand Promenade in the morning.
We'd like everybody, if you have hats, take your hats down. And this is like the Pledge of Allegiance song of France. La Marseillaise, right there. La Marseillaise. Everybody who knows French, join in. And where's my husband?
Hi, Tonya. I'm down in St. Genevieve.
And
And so now I would like to introduce to you Kathy Grusling, the chairperson of the festival committee. Kathy.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. We have a perfect day this year, lovely breeze. We have events planned all around town, from right here on the square all the way down to Main Street Park, the Lions Club Park in the middle of town. They have food, we have beverages all through the evening. We're having Dennis Stromat, who plays fantastic Cajun music. He's very well known. He will be here this evening. There's activities going on at our two of our in-town sites, our historic sites. Actually, three of them. Marie Antoinette is up at the Gibor Valet House, at the Felix Valet House. They have all kinds of activities. And also at the Bolduc House, which is now called New France. All of them are included in this wonderful day. And to get it rolling, laissez les bon temps rouler.
So at this time, we're going to assemble for the Grand Promenade. I'd like to ask everybody, please join us as we process down the street. We have extra tambourines and noisemakers and flags. Everyone's welcome to join us as we proceed down Merchant Street to Main and the Main Street Park area. So I'd like the police to please perform a salute to the King and Queen in whatever form, escort us down onto the street to our horseless carriages, led by Mickey Petty and Kathy Grusling and our Queen, Mary Lou Visnovsky.
this water has starch in it, so it's thick. Thick water is going to support the paint. Now the paint is actually wetter than the water in the box. Put a little bit of red in there. Now this red is an oxide of iron, so it's inorganic. We don't have any organics here. It's all from like iron oxides and things. Clay pigments. And I'm doing a classic pattern. It's very common. If I can pull it off, it requires a certain drop size, so I'm really careful in regulating my drops here. If they're too big, they get in the way. If they're too small, they don't get in the way enough. So, and it's typically red, yellow, blue, this pattern. It's called a French curl, and it showed up in Europe in the 1660s, and it's not French, it's German. I'm going to put a little bit more blue, and then I might pop a little bit more yellow to break up the blue. I'm going to leave it like that. So the paint's on the water because it's wetter than the water in the box. The paint does not have starch in it. The water in the box has starch. It's thicker. And we'll take a rake. I'm going to take this rake. That spacing is about right for this pattern. I've seen the original patterns, and they were made with a rake about that wide. Stick it in. Gently move it into a curl. Move down to the next line. So I'm doing one line at a time. And I have to be gentle because if I go too fast, the water keeps moving and you get out of that nice even curl. Now there is a tool that would do the whole thing all at once, and I don't have one. So I do one line at a time.
Looks pretty.
So that it's finished, but now we're going to make it permanent. We're going to make a print off of the water by letting the dry paper grab a hold of that thin film that's sitting on top of the water. So I'm going to just let it sit for a second, and I'm going to do a little bit of maintenance here. It helps to clean the edges a bit before you pull it out. And now we're going to reveal that French curl.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
There it is. Red, yellow, blue.
Pretty?
Common.
Yeah. Pretty. That is really pretty. Wow. Now how do you clean that out for your next one?
Well, I can use a wooden paddle and shove it over here and let it sink. Or I can shove it over there and pick it up with a piece of paper and throw it out.
That's amazing.
And
And then you just use that starch water again.
Yes, it's clear and clean. And I can probably get 40 or so sheets out of this today, if I'm not too forceful on the paint.
Yeah.
Because the paint, you don't want it to go below the surface. You want it to hit and spread out before it goes below. But certain patterns, you know, you throw a lot of paint, and to get a certain effect, you throw it hard, and you contaminate your water. And it can, you'd be surprised how dirty your water can be, and you can still marble fine. The problem is your eye sees what's not really there, because the dirty water underneath is changing the color on top. See, because all of our paints are transparent to some degree. It's watercolor. It's not like an acrylic or an oil where it's opaque. So you're seeing the bottom of the tray. You know, light goes through it, and that's how the papers are actually. We're seeing the paper color behind it. So when we started getting paper in America back in after 1600 or so, the paper wasn't that good. It was kind of a brownish color. It was really pretty bad. So anything that we printed on was kind of dark. See, I'm just cleaning right now. Luckily, we weren't marbling at that time in America, so we were getting nice, good paper from Europe. We didn't marble here until about 1810, so we were late. Marbling had been going on in Europe since about 1600, but
How did you learn how to do it?
I needed paper for my book binding, and I met Curtis Finley, gentleman that was in St. Louis. He's out somewhere else now in Pacific, I believe. He was marbling paper, and he showed me how to do it.
Huh.
And I needed it because I was a binder at the time, and books have bindings of marbling on them, so it all kind of goes together.
Look at that one back there. That's beautiful. Isn't it pretty? Yeah.
That one's fun to do.
This is a really good
I mean, did
whisk.
you know that was going to turn out like that?
Mhm.
You did.
You
Yeah.
pre-plan what you want to do before
Yeah.
you do it, especially when it's super hot out today, because the surface of the water is going to dry really quickly because of the starch. So we have to know immediately what colors we're going to use, the style we're going to use, the pressure size, and what rakes we want to use before we even start. Because as we're putting the paint down, it's going to dry, the paint's not going to open up. So we have to be very quick in this sort of temperature to achieve the right effect.
You almost have, the hotter it is, the faster you have to move.
Which sometimes can hinder, especially if you're trying to do rake patterns, because you don't want to go too quick because you'll lose your pattern completely.
That's right.
What was the one I was doing where we had to do big drops and then we rake? Oh, never mind, I remember.
I think I'm going to leave that just the way it is.
Okay, I'm going to watch
See
one
how it
because I like
looks.
to watch that so
I
interesting.
put a little green. Now our green is really pale today. I'm not sure yet. I may put a double.
Especially.
Yes. So lay this in. Now we lay it down in a way that's
Oh, you didn't rake it this time?
no, but I am doing something a little different. I'm kind of shaking it back and forth as I go in.
And that's going to make a pattern in itself. It's called Spanishing.
Spanish.
Yeah. And that's because the Spaniards were doing it. They were the first to do it, supposedly the first to do it a lot. I'm sure it was being done before then. But they were kind of known for that, the shake of the paper. And it usually you don't get it on your first paper. Usually you have to put paint down and check out the density of the paint, see if it's dark enough to even show up the shake.
Because sometimes it won't.
Yeah, this may not show up, but it'll be there, but maybe not enough.
Oh, wow, look at that.
No, it came out.
It came out. A little bit of a diagonal line through there.
Yeah.
See that? Well, that diagonal is a distortion of the paper as it was shook, and that's a little uneven, but I can
Oh, it's pretty.
I can get better.
Yeah. No.
There's a muscle coordination going on here. Back and forth, the speed you're going back and forth, and the speed you're going down. All that has to be just right, or you'll cut through the paint, or you'll see these. That's actually a cut there. I moved too fast, but these are okay. These are nice. It's all about,
It's pretty.
yeah, it's a skill. You just got to get
Yeah.
better at it by practicing it. In cooler days, I believe is easier to marble that pattern because you could throw more paint on it. The more paint you have, the more effect it will show of movement.
It looks like, I don't know, like water. You're looking down and looking at rocks or something.
There's one that he does with the Spanishing that reminds me of little tide pools.
Oh, yeah. That one just reminds me of rocks or something. Like a creek or whatever.
Right now he's cleaning the water and all of the paint that he just put in there. That's their paper. And then he ends up taking his and sprinkles over the water.
Oh, look, there's a little book.
Little books.
Here's one kind of like we just did.
So this is going to be another Spanish pattern, but much later. This is actually a modern pattern that came out of, I believe, the United States.
Amazing.
Yellow ochre, very light color, and I'm going to put a lot of Prussian blue in. And Prussian blue is the darkest color. And when I put this in, it's going to be yellow that precedes it. It's going to be pushed or out of the way. It draws away from the blue because of the surfactant we put in the paint to make it float. The liver bile is doing its job. And this pattern normally has large drops of Prussian blue, very large. But I'm trying to make it a little smaller in scale because it's a smaller paper and it would be on a smaller book. So you've got to gauge your pattern size to the application you're going to put it on. You know, little books, little patterns. Otherwise, you could go right off the book with a big circle, right? So, though this pattern does look better when it's larger. So that yellow is being pushed into things. This really isn't.
I need to just add more paint.
Yeah, just put
I
more
need to
paint.
not be afraid of it.
And we're going to use a thick rod, and the thick rod's going to move more water. It's like a big shovel moves more dirt. More water moves, carries more paint. And look at that, we're just stretching that paint. The thing about marbling is, every day is a due day. And depending on where you are and pressure, the air, the temperature, humidity, and all that kind of affects what you're doing. So that is about right. I hope I put enough blue in there. Now I'm going to start at this end and move down. And I'm going to move it back and forth like I did before. And I can sort of see underneath. I did move it short ones this time. Or if there were more of a longer movement. And that was because I want more space in between them. Let's cross our fingers and see if I did this right.
I think you did. It came out okay out in the newsprint.
Oh, look at that.
It is.
Yeah, nice birdie.
Now, this is a very, I don't know the right word to describe this version of this pattern, but it's a lot of lines going
That's
around.
pretty.
Normally, there's not as many lines. It's just blue, yellow veins, but I still like it the way it is. I would have to adjust the way I do my paint to get it the other way, which is more, it's flatter. It's flatter material. It's a nice pattern. And again, it's fairly modern. It was started in about the late, very, very late 1800s into the 1920s, I think. We got to rinse them well today.
We gotta make sure the backs get wet enough because we started.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Unless we have to re-wet them.
Yeah.
And then, if necessary, I've got this end of the trephine. I can use it to pry that skull piece out. And by all that fluid flowing out the way it does, now what's going to happen is that it's a self-cleaning wound. So out of all the surgeries I can do in the 18th century, you're going to survive by drilling a hole in your head. You got about an 80% survival rate. Whereas if I have to amputate, if I have to use a cautery iron for something, you have a much higher chance of dying.
Cautery is more dangerous than the hole.
What?
That cautery iron is more dangerous than the hole in the head.
In terms of survival. But it, because if you used it and sealed up a wound and there was infection under the wound, now that all that material is going bad, the pus, we have laudable pus in it. we thought it was good if we could see all that ugly pus forming. But when it started turning purple, greens, reds, and violets, that's not good. And if you'd already had like a major wound starting to heal, you got this great big scab there, that's when we could use this neat little device. And you can see this one only has a total of 8 blades. And what I had to do, I had to fix it so it won't actually slam shut, because at one event I said, okay, once you get that, you've got that scab you want to remove, you put this on, it's called a scarificator, you press the button, and all 8 blades go in at once, and all you have to do is one twist of the wrist, and you rip that whole scab off. And of course people said, well, that's terrible. I said, well, okay, if you don't want me to do it that way, I can take the lancet and I can start picking that scab off. It's like taking off a Band-Aid. Some people, they want it all over at once. Grab it, and it's done. And some people would rather take the Band-Aid and go, oh, you know, they want to prolong it in little bits. So you have a choice. You can either get it done right away, or you can take the longer time and enjoy the experience more, I guess. So, but this was used to burn off cancers, lesions, warts, corns, whatever you want to call them, that people have. Is it still used? Yes. You can see there's a little sort of a whitish round spot on my head, somewhere right up in there. That was the first time I had to have a precancerous growth burned off. And my doctor, who would come and listen to me give my talks and loved, we had good times talking about it. I went into his office and said, Steve, I got to take that off. I said, all right. I said, what are you going to give me for the pain? He said, I've listened to you talk about that often enough. You can stand it. And he said, but I want to use Dr. Franklin's invention. I said, huh? He said, your friend, Dr. Franklin. And then he held it up, and here's this flexible cord that goes down into one of the converters from AC to DC current in his wall. And he says, okay, this looks like it's hot enough. And he put it up there, and I could smell it burning off. It hurt like the devil, but it was off, and I was okay for a while. Do we use these today? Well, no, fortunately. But today we use liquid nitrogen. And now when I go in to see my doctor, she takes this, she's got like a little ring that you could, can't even put an egg in it, it's just a very small size, and she'll put it wherever she's going to use it, and she gets this can of liquid nitrogen out, and she sprays it. I tell you, it burns, it hurts just as much as using that cautery iron. To me, there's no difference in it. So that's why I like to tell people, don't worry about 18th century medicine, because you still get to use it today. Different form. The idea of the bleeding, you know, people didn't want to do, today say, oh, I don't believe in that. Well, why are the doctors doing it again? Guys like us, we have a very good chance, if we've got a certain gene, we hold iron. And if blood doesn't come out, we can die from it, from an excess of iron in our blood. So giving blood regularly at the Red Cross makes sure that problem's handled. But the bleeding bowl, mine, because I do things right, I've got 3 lines that were etched in here. Now the first line I fill up with hot water. Okay, I then put a tourniquet on your arm. I want to stop the blood from flowing out of the arm. I want there to be a great big vein here so I can see it. Once I can see it, I can use my lancet. And you've heard we didn't clean our instruments back then. This pretty well shows an original, it wasn't cleaned open. But it's still very sharp. I can cut into that vein. I cut laterally rather than horizontally. If I cut horizontally, I can sever the vessel, and now you could lose your hand, and you're gonna go around and tell everybody I'm a bad doctor, and I have to move again. Or I can use some of the other neat instruments, like I can use the fleam, which has 3 different blades. I can choose the size I want, and I can use that and tap the vein. In whatever way I'm going to use it, once I've tapped the vein, I'm going to put your hand in with that warm water. Now, while you're watching warm water turn pink, I'm watching for the level of the blood and water to go from the first line to the second line. Second line, I've taken out a pint of blood. Colonial times and thereafter, up to Civil War times, at least a pint of blood. You have to take a pint of blood, or don't bother taking it. Doesn't do any good. So, what good does it do, and why did people allow a bleeding all that time? My 1787 medical book lists the diseases. Over 160 of them are diseases that are called fevers. So you sort of know what happens when you have a fever. Your face is all red, your skin's hot, you feel terrible. I take out a pint of blood. Do you think your face is all red anymore? See, it's working. It's working, isn't it? And do you think your skin's hot? Or is it like so many people who give a pint of blood and they're just clammy cold? It's working. Two things are working about it. And if you stand up too quickly, don't you feel sort of euphoric? Sort of like you're floating on your feet? 3 of the symptoms of your illness are gone just by one good bleeding. Why? You're going to leave and know it was the proper treatment, and you'll come back to have it done again because it works. Did we cure your illness? No, but we did cure the symptoms of your illness, and that's all we can do in the 18th century because we don't know what causes illness.
So the divot in that side of that bowl, I thought it was broken. That's actually purposeful.
That is purposeful.
So the arm and the leg.
You can put your arm in. Its real purpose for being there is it's called a surgeon barber bowl. In early European history, when the colonies were being settled, surgeons, there weren't enough of them to be able to buy a patent from the king so they could be their own guild. The barbers bought them out. They bid more money. The barbers used it like this. So you can put the soap on the face, scrape off the whiskers, water in the bowl, pour the water out through a cheesecloth, recapture the soap, use it for the next customer who needs a shave. Okay, but it also worked to keep the hand in there. Why did I use hot water in there? If you bleed into hot water, you're less likely to pass out than if I just let you bleed into the bowl with nothing there, or if I use cold water. And I know enough tricks of the trade to try and make sure I don't get run out of town. So that's what that one is.
We've got other stuff to make, but this has been very educational.
Thank you. I had quite a few people here to listen to my stories and ask questions, so that's always a good day when that happens.
But she's also very
This is called the ball and cup, and the trick is to get the ball up in the air and put it in the cup. Right. Welcome to try it. This is a hands-on kind of
All right. No. Oh, no.
Yeah.
You're under pressure.
Under pressure,
Oh, close. Good luck.
Hey,
This guy's got good hand.
that's better than I can.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
got
no,
better
no.
coordination than me.
Maybe after
He's close.
Get gonna have to sand the ball down a little bit. I know, it's a trick.
Oh, I thought you almost had it that time.
I bet he's tricking you. I bet the ball's bigger than the cup.
I can't believe I did it. Now edit out everything else.
First try.
Simple.
Nice job.
Bravo.
I don't want to try that again.
Bravo.
This is called a magic stick or a whistle stick, and if you rub it, it kind of goes. And if you say like whistle or say abracadabra, good whistle. Oh, look, it went the other way.
He's playing with us.
And kids had little
like
things to occupy their time. They would even make, soldiers would make this thing out of lead bullets and hammer it down. And
doing that with buttons.
yeah, buttons is another thing.
You could put a design on the side of it, I suppose.
And it could almost show up as it spun.
Yeah.
Tops were big. This one isn't colonial, but it's a neat little thing. My uncle made one for me when I was a kid. And the trick is to, see that little notch in there?
Yeah.
The trick is to catch the rubber band in the bottom and get it to snap back.
Well, that's just a guess now.
It's pretty straightforward. I mean,
It goes in?
it goes in, you catch it, and once you know the trick is straightforward.
Alright. Quarter turn.
Actually, the trick is there is no rubber band on the bottom. When you squeeze it on its angles, it makes it look like it's snapping back in.
A musician.
You've got to put your fingers up closer to the top. Yeah.
I'm a fool.
No.
So what other illusion?
You guys are probably too young to remember lawn darts.
Yeah, they outlawed those.
Yeah, they outlawed them.
Because somebody got
Well, this was
pierced on the other
like
lawn.
colonial lawn jarts. They were called graces, and you'd have a pair of people, and you put your ring on and pull them apart real quick, like that, and the ring sails through the air, and the other person had to catch it.
Okay.
And so that was, both boys and girls played that. This was kind of the first bowling. These are called 9 pins. You'd set up, I actually have 9 on them, but you'd set it up on a tabletop and roll it. Tops, you know about, and yo-yos, and this is, you can spin this and it'll fly.
Sure.
And this one is called Shut the Box. And this is one that's a favorite with kids. And I like it because it teaches math. So if you'll care to roll the dice. So you got 7. So you could turn 7 up, a 6 and a 1, or a 5 and a 2, or a 3 and a 4. And the goal is to do all 12 numbers before you can't do one. So
I see.
Okay, so you get to pick. You rolled a 7. You can do. The strategy is to go to the big numbers first, but that's all right. Go ahead. You'll.
I see.
10. Eat again, huh?
8.
Doing good. 10
again.
Oh, what do you got
Oh,
here?
no.
You still got options.
Okay, okay, right. So,
7,
4, and 2.
7, 3. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
So teach me.
7. So,
5 and 2.
Okay. Well,
Although it's
whoops.
That's
it.
Game's
So
over.
you didn't shut the box.
Fun.
It's a really neat game because it teaches thought and math and They make it in 6 or 9 also, which is a lot easier than doing 12 because you got to roll that double.
You'd have to get a double 6 to get that 12.
I had one lady walk up and the first time I showed you, first time, shut the box.
That's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, marbles were.
Oh yeah, how do you do marbles?
Well, I mean, they did all kinds of games. We still did them when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too.
And,
How do you play marbles?
well, you would draw a circle,
Okay.
and you have shooters, and they have names for all these different things, and you try to take your thumb, and you try to
Knock someone else's marble
marbles
out of the
out.
circle.
Yeah, that's just probably made out of clay and fire, or wood. It could be wood.
Oh, okay.
But those, and if you can knock the other guy's marble out, you get his marble. So I mean, there would be big battles on the playground for your marbles. That's all the You remember the saying, all the marbles?
Yeah. Or you don't have all your marbles?
we got good. We used to get, like in the gym, we 30 feet apart and shoot it. And,
Now, what do you have?
oh, this is just a little pastime, just kind of like kids.
Are you a ventriloquist?
Just a little dancing man.
Oh. That's too funny.
And the people, that was just a dancing man, so it's just another toy pastime. And but households in St. Genevieve, people always there was musicians.
Always,
musicians, and in fact, you read some of the stories where they talked about on Sunday evenings, where the people would just sit on the porch and play music and converse and pass the time. But dancing was a big thing in St. Genevieve too. People, even though it was kind of a farmer community, but people still loved to dance. They would get together and dance and jigs.
In the houses,
Yes.
they'd have balls like the King's Ball on Epiphany, and typically on Sundays the kids had to go to a ball, and there would be the elder people there to teach them etiquette and manners, and then the adults would have a ball, and it was pretty cosmopolitan. I mean, it wasn't very class conscious. Everybody could go, and just a good time. We still do a King's Ball in February.
Heard about that.
You need to come down for that. It's
Absolutely.
you don't have to dress up, but you can if you want. And you could become the king and queen of St. Genevieve for a year.
Yes, yes. And later tonight at 7, Dance Discovery Group out of St. Louis that performs historical dances.
Tonight at 7?
Yes, right here.
We'll be right here.
Oh,
Yeah,
just do
we'll be
that.
right here at 7. Come back, please do.
They
And,
do a little French storytelling of the area over at Old Mines, and the French. All their stories were about animals
Yes,
and stuff
it's
like
seen that way.
Little John and his animal friends, the half rooster, stuff like that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And then later on that evening, over at the Lions Club, they're having Dennis Stromat play. And if you have never heard Upper Louisiana fiddle music, you ought to go to that.
Yeah, Dennis is he's from Southern Illinois, but when he was going to college at Cape, he'd spent a lot of time over in Old Mines, which is another French area, and in Old Mines, but there was a lot of fiddle players there, and they kept music alive, and there was some of those songs, French Creole songs, are old. I mean, when they migrated here, they brought with them from France, and so a lot of those are old French folk songs or Creole songs that we say, and he's learned a lot of those from some of the old fiddle players, and he's preserving that music. So he'll be over here tonight.
A gentleman that could afford wine would have a nice corkscrew, and if you really were a high-ranking officer, you would have a nice flask, one that doesn't leak, tends to leak a little bit. They also had wallets in those days, with just some deer or cow hide that would have some compartments in it. You would keep your money, albeit there wasn't a lot of paper money passing around the frontier. It was mostly coins, or they just bartered. Okay. I'm going to tell you real quick here before I turn you over to Doug over there with his tent. How many of you have been in your local tavern and needed to smoke and said, doggone, I left my pipe at home? Okay, well, this is what you would have done in the 18th century. They would have had several of these, maybe up to a dozen in a large tavern hanging on the wall. Okay? You come in and you've either forgotten your pipe, you don't have a pipe, and you want to smoke with your friends while you're playing cards and enjoying some cold refreshment. So you would rent one, maybe a penny. Okay? So you would get your pipe. If you don't have your own tobacco, you would buy some tobacco, and you would enjoy your pipe for the evening. At the end of the evening, you turn the pipe back in, you go home, And the tavern keeper was supposed to break off a little piece on the end, you know, just enough, because this would turn brown after a while, and no one wants to, you know,
Everybody else
puff and mouth
spit,
disease.
you know.
So they would break this off and they would hang it back on, and eventually, of course, it would get shorter and shorter and shorter until it got so short to the point where the smoke would be too hot and it wouldn't be pleasurable, and they would throw it away. Now, at Williamsburg, probably about 10 years ago, they reconstructed one of the taverns over the original site, and when they were doing the earthworks and digging, they found literally thousands of pipe bowls where, when it got too short, they just dropped it through the cracks in the floor and hang up a new one, and there was just a mound of pipe bowls under the floor, well, what used to be the floor of the tavern. And they would either light their pipes from a candle, or they would have these small strips, preferably of pine, that your carpenters would have been using their
planers.
Planers, thank you. And they would just light that and light their pipe. And, so it was kind of a form of an early match. Now, you could take some soft stone, like soapstone, and you could make your own pipe or trade for a pipe and come up with your own reed, and there you go. And when you're done with it, you just tie it and hang it around your neck. So there's another way you could smoke. They had long pipes, they had short pipes. A lot of the soldiers would put their pipe in the back of their hat and just carry it with them, and that way they didn't have to worry about sitting on it. So, and they were quite fragile. They were very easily to break.
Good, how are you?
There's another one right there. Let's see. Women. My favorite subject. Not a lot of white women on the frontier in those days, okay? They just weren't here. What they would do, the French government, actually, that would be documented, turn the PG sign around. They would go to the prisons, the jails, beggars in the streets went, and I believe in the beginning that's where they got a lot of their Marines. They got them from the prisons and the jails. Hey, you want to go over to New France and maybe have some property of your own? Hey, I'm all up for that. And off they go. Well, they went and they did the same thing with the women. Any single women that they could find, they would clean them up, wash them up, give them a new dress, put them on a ship, and ship them over to Nouvelle France. Only problem is when you're on a ship full of men for 2 months, things happen, and so most cases when you got there, you had a ready-made family. I'm just telling you. But they came into port either in Canada, up in Quebec, or they came into New Orleans. Well, by the time they got here, there weren't many left. Okay, if any. So most of the women here were born here. Okay, from settlers. Now you also you would marry the Indian as well, and that was great going both ways, because if Joe over here, who's a Coeur d'Ivoire French trader, marries an Indian woman, now he has inroads into the tribe. He doesn't have to worry about getting scalped. He can trade, he can hunt, he can fish, he can go anywhere he wants. And the tribe, the Indians, the settlement now have a connection to the whites, and they can trade for pots and pans and spoons and forks and guns and powder and round ball and whatever they need. So it went both ways. It was good. It was good for both parties. And that was the most common practice in this area. If you married, you usually ended up marrying in the early days. Okay, I'm talking about in the mid to late 1600s. Then, as more people began to come here and lived and died and had families, and the population grew, and of course there were more women available, but not in the beginning. Okay, so there was a lot of interracial marriage between the Indians and the white settlers. What am I leaving out? The lantern, yes, boy, 18th century amaranth, right here. Okay, if you're like me, you sit down and you look at your bill, and out of a $150 bill, you only bought actually $30 worth of electricity, your rent and everything else. In those days, they actually had wooden lanterns that you could make. Not so good if they caught on fire. So if you could afford one, you would have a metal lantern with glass. It either had a reflective back on it, or it was glass all the way around. In most cases, you made your own candles. You would start off with the wick. You had a hot pot of tallow here, which could be anything from animal fat to whatever. If you bought a block of wax, and then you had a cold bucket of water over here, and you just took the wick and you went tallow, cold water, cold water, just back and forth, back and forth. which led some people to have these little gizmos where they might have 6 or 7 or 8 wicks. And now you're doing half a dozen at a time. They didn't look anything like the tapered candles that you see in Walmart today. They were scraggly, nasty looking things, but they got the job done. Okay? And if you took your time and you did it correctly, you would have a decent looking candle. They also had candle molds, which was quite literally, it was the shape of a tapered candle, and they usually came in half a dozen. And you would put the wick on the top and then pour the tallow or the wax into the mold and let it cool. And the only problem is sometimes they would stick. It was best in the wintertime. Then you would freeze the mold and pour the hot tallow into it, and they came out much easier. Real quick here, I don't know if I talked to you about the hats or not. Military, both officers and men had felt hats. This is actually a round hat, believe it or not. You just tack up the 2 sides and the back and it turns into a tricorn. Now, the enlisted man's tricorn simply had gold cotton trim. There was no gold in it. The officers actually had real gold intertwined with the material, the thread, and they actually had gold in their hats. The black cockade signified that this gentleman was a member of the Marines and had served with the Marines. No enlisted man would have had a pistol or a set of pistols unless they put them up on the field of battle as a trophy, in which case they always traded because they weren't paid that well when they were paid. But this is a nice matching set that I've acquired over the years. Another hat that they would have worn on the military side is called a toque or a work hat. Would have worn this when they were out and about around the fort, doing whatever had to be done that day when they were on duty. Anything? That's everything that I can think of. The hood, the spyglass, every officer had a spyglass. Had a compass, you had to know where you were going, you had to see where you were going. Anything an officer had with him when he left the military went with him. Enlisted man, not so much. You had clothes on your back, your musket stayed, all your accoutrements stayed, because you didn't have that much.
Was there age limit on servicemen then, or just?
Most people, if they lived to be 40, you were doing good. I mean, and women was even less, because especially now, if you were wealthy, you were a trader, a merchant, not so much. But if you were the wife of a soldier or a very high poor person, the women literally died from being overworked. I mean, just exhaustion. You just wore yourself out day after day after day. I mean, if you got up tomorrow morning and you didn't have any food in your house and you couldn't go buy any food, you had to go trap it or hunt it or dig it up or catch it or whatever, a lot of us would be in trouble. And that's what it was. It was just a daily fight for survival for food on the frontier. And that's another thing that drove people into the military. I'm going to get some clothes, I'm going to be fed. I may not be paid on a regular basis, but at least I'm going to have clothes on my back and food in my mouth. And that was one thing that drove a lot of them to the military.
I am a long hunter and go out for like a week at a time and hunt for food. And so I carry about 2 pounds of lead and about a pound of gunpowder with me. I carry the lead in ingots like this. Usually I'll carry a collapsible ladle, and this is my bullet mold. And the bullet mold is the exact size I need for my musket. These bullet molds date back to the late 1800s to about the mid 1900s. And what I'm doing is I have some lead inside here, inside this ladle, and the lead will melt at around 620 degrees. So because I had the ladle out for a while, it takes a while for the ladle to get hot enough to melt the lead. So the ladle has to get hot first. Once the ladle is hot, then the lead will start melting. And I figure right now I'm probably looking at around 700 to almost 750 degrees in my fire. It takes a couple minutes for it to melt.
How's it going?
And what they would do is they would go out at night and hunt. I mean, they would go out and hunt. And then at night, when they came into camp, they would start their fire and they would start working on their dinner. And then if they needed to, or if they wanted to, they would start making lead bullets, or round balls they call them. And then you can see it's going to start melting. It turns into a liquid. It takes a few minutes. See how it started to collapse? Fire is a little bit low. See how it's starting to disappear?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, I will. You want to try?
No, I don't want to try. I cut myself.
See, it turns into a liquid.
I'm going to stand far away though.
Once it turns into a liquid,
Sure you want to try?
Sure, I don't want to try. Olivia, you want to try?
then you would take it over here, pour it inside the bullet mold.
Trust me, you're safe.
You are. Come back over here. Start it this way. My aim's really bad. I wouldn't be scared. Yeah. All right, yay!
The problem a lot of people have when they throw it is when they throw it, they do this.
Oh, okay.
Comes out.
Stick your thumb on it, and you got to keep
And you
it
take these
straight.
part here and cut
you
the
gotta-
tailings off. And you
gotta
end up
learn
with
how
something
many
like
times it turns.
this.